membership growth and membership retention. And one of the things that you all can do with that is make it a point to say hello to people you don't know. We're asking everybody to try to bring your name badge every time, so it makes it easier to recognize who people are. But when you come to a meeting, try to say hello to someone you've not met before to strike up a conversation. It's real simple. What are you working on? What are you making? What issues you have in woodworking? So just remember that. We're trying to draw out for participation. If you have friends who you know are in woodworking, ask them to come join us. We'd love to see more people here. A couple of quick announcements. Jim Wright. First, go ahead.
Okay. I'm looking for volunteers that also want to take photographs of everything. So I can only be on one side of the room. We need perspectives from the other side of the room. We need people to interview the people that are bringing in things and get pictures with them. So we also need volunteers to help out, back up to the remote control cameras and the video camera in the back. So if you're interested, I sort of put my name up there. You can almost read it. I mean, that's my email address, right, jim@hellsouth.net. So talk to me afterwards or send me an email.
Talk to any of us and we'll get your name information to Jim. Gary Peterson, we have 2 or 3 more chairs in the back. Chris Richards.
Most of you know that I have an interest in old tools, collecting old tools, and the closest opportunity to Atlanta will be January 31st, February 1st. That's Friday and Saturday over in Madison, Georgia. It's at the Lions Club facility. If you take I-20 east, I think it takes at 114. Just look for the big water tank. It's under the water tank. But that's the next big opportunity. It's the closest one to us here in Atlanta.
It's Midwest Tool Collectors Association.
That's it.
And a lot of people tailgating and selling small tools.
Yeah, it starts before daylight and it'll go to the evening.
Is that going on for over 20 years?
Yeah, it's been going on for well over 20 years.
They usually don't have.
You can come as a guest, and we have a Madison meet. Is that what you just told us?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's Saturday, Sunday, or is it Friday and Saturday?
Friday and Saturday.
Yeah. Coming up.
And you didn't get that information from St. Brent after the meeting. Is it this Friday?
Friday is January 31st.
Okay, one more general announcement, and also specific to like Meyer. But on our website, we have an area called forums, and there's an area called trading posts. In the forum section and in trading posts, we have a separate. Again, you have the trading post specifically, but that's also in forums. You'll find in forums things for sale that members, and frankly, we've got some stuff non-members for sale. It's equipment, it's lumber, and other things. And that changes on an ongoing basis. After something's on there about 3 months, we take it off. So there's always about 10 things on there. So we encourage you to go to forums and see what's there, see what things are interesting. Mike specifically has an item on the forum to sell some ash lumber again. He has lots of other stuff because he's got to lose. So he has lumber on there, but he has solvents and stains, and I don't know what else you find in your own shop.
I've gone on there to look at lumber and stuff, and I have emailed the people like it says to do and stuff, and I've never ever gotten a response back, so I haven't gone back on there.
Okay, I'm sorry, you'll have to stay that up with people who can actually email. It's the best I can do. But I know Mike will answer his email if you want to get something from Mike.
Yeah. Hey, John, some of these guys want to sit down. We've got 5 chairs over here, but I think they're going to have to come around the front.
Yeah.
Go over here. They want to sit.
Thank you.
2 here.
What is that?
One more thing also is, some of you know, but probably most of you don't know, we have a committee today that is organized to help sell tools. Most often is for when a woodworker has passed away and the spouse is left with a shop full of tools. And we play a role in trying to get we often host and put on a sale at the shop. Sometimes we get some things donated. But we have a small committee that's overburdened and overworked, and we need more volunteers to participate. Don't happen often, but probably 4 or 5 times a year, there's easily that many opportunities to participate. And what we do is we go out a week or 2 before the sale typically on a Saturday morning, and we go through and price all the tools, and then we have a help team there on Saturday to help execute the sale. If you have an interest in participating, Jim Mullen is the guy who heads that committee. We have several other regulars, but if you have an interest, you let me know that, just send me an email. I'll get you in touch with him, and we truly do need people to participate there. So let us know if you're willing to participate.
And I say, I have, anybody that's interested in making flutes, I got a couple of bamboo flute blanks that you're welcome to.
Thank you, Mel.
You teach yourself?
Hey?
You teach yourself?
Sure. I made several.
Show and tell. Let's start at the back there. I guess it's just the box here, boxes here. Too many boxes.
Is that me?
Probably.
I have some good news and bad news. These are my Christmas 2020 presents. That's good. I started out making, I thought it'd be quick and easy to make 20, and I didn't get any finished except this. So this is, I ran out of enough wood, so I made a circular box here, but this is Paduke and ebony, unfinished walnut and ebony, and beginning and finished walnut with maple, and they have the interior, I'm not trying to, and the joint for the bottom is a 8-sided octagonal joint that you can kind of glue these together. And so that's what I try to make, and that's it. And so now I'm working on the hinges. And it turns out the good news is that the locks for these boxes sell for $10 to $50 each for a lock. Don't put a lock on it. So I may not put a lock on it. Put a rubber band. Put a magnet.
Yes.
Thank you, Andy. We made a little,
I did.
there you go, Joey.
Little natural edge walnut. This is white bond, Roscoe white bond poly. Odd shaped wood, odd shaped wood. Cherry with a true oil gunstock finish. And a little box, cherry box. If this has a little candy sealer and wax.
And the musical instrument for working.
The guitar that doesn't play.
Yours play?
I wish, right? So my grandson's birthday is next week. This will be in the mail tomorrow. But it's got the picture off the internet. It's made a pattern of the picture. And cut it out on this. Finished with midnight candy foil finish and a coat of chalk wax. And inside is lined with stiff felt. Seems to work pretty well, so I use it in walking.
Cool. And a student group?
My wife bought a primitive stool and I was impressed with all the joinery, so I used some wood I found on a beach and made a model after that stool. And finished it in shellac and wax. It's solid, it's just made together, no glue.
Before we do the drawings, any more show and tell? Who's here for the first time tonight? What do we got? Let's just start in the corner. Just tell us who you are, what your interest is in woodworking briefly, and welcome to the community.
My name is Jeff, and I've been working probably most of my, since high school, shop class in high school. I live in Holly Springs. It's a little bit of a drive, but I was glad to be here. I've been to the store before and didn't know there was a meeting. It was a gift. My wife gave it to me for Christmas. And I probably would have never done it, so I'm glad she did.
Wonderful. Well, we hope to see you anytime. Let's just come on, who's next over here? Just come across the room.
Tom Gordy, live up in Cumming, Georgia. I've always done remodeling for the past 10, 15 years and kind of retired now. And found John Jones on a woodworking forum next door up in Cumming, and invited me to come down. And it was a great turnout. And, don't have any specific things. I just want to get into woodworking, work with the hands, and smell the wood.
Yeah, you're next.
Okay.
Sure.
My name's Colton Hanna. I live up in Cleveland, Georgia. I'm interested in hand tool woodworking primarily. I like Japanese joinery and looking to get into like box making and that kind of stuff.
Kind of the right way.
Doug Curtis, I'm from Durango as well. They were working in shop class in high school, off and on and off and on. Learned a little, forgot a whole bunch, want to learn a lot more.
Somebody else in the back room?
Yeah, I'm John Lee, live in Midtown, Atlanta. I've been making sawdust for a long time, and have a shop on the west side of Midtown. Mostly I make tables and benches and anything else that comes along.
And I've been to your shop.
Yeah.
It's great.
It is a nice place. Anybody's welcome to come.
Fantastic. Make that good one. Come across here.
This is not actually my first meeting. First time I joined the guild was in 1993.
We'll call it the first thing.
So it's basically the first. I recognize Nell and Jim Wright and other people in here. Boy Scouts took me away from woodworking for a while, so now I decided I'm not doing that now. I'm back.
Right, welcome back. We have a couple of here.
Hi, I'm Glenn Jarbett. I started birdhouses and now I'm working on boxes and dovetails with hand tools.
Fantastic. Any others? That's super. Well, I hope you all will come back often and be part of this. If you have questions about things you're interested in, ask anyone in the guild and we can find others who have a similar interest or can answer those questions. If you have information you can share, same thing, share that with others around you. Great group of people over there, huge collection too. Thanks for being here. Raffle time. First of all, blue tickets. And this is for the Highland course. And I won't get into specifics if you get selected. If you want to, I would withdraw this. If you want to take the course at Highland, see Tom Nelcher in the back room. He's the camera back here. Essentially, this is a free course. It's a little complicated. You don't have to pay half and get your half back.
And you have to write an article.
And you have to write an article.
But it ends up being free.
There is a requirement. But it's fantastic opportunity. It's really awesome. The lucky number is, last we did was 856.
Not free.
You want to take it, Carl?
No, I did it in November, thank you.
Okay. Those remain an extra opportunity. 863. Bryce Williams, you want to take the course now? Okay, I'll let you see Tom Nelson. And several things from Rescue. We're going to start out here with a Rockford gift certificate for $20.
I did it first.
1995.
Not me, you want to start. 1995. You want to blame that?
1995?
Yeah. There you go, Mike.
Okay, Mike.
Yeah. That's a back of Mike. There you go. 936. 936. 936. This is for a $15 woodcraft gift certificate. 1936. 936. Yeah, 1936. Back here.
Not here. Just pass it back.
Why went that? And then we have a $10 woodcraft gift certificate. Go, Mary.
Get it down to one.
It's tough when you get over this. 978. 1978.
Draw another one. I've already got one tonight.
Okay. 842. I'm going to 842. And our last giveaways, there's 5 of them. We'll do this quickly. General Finishes gave us some cloth. So there's 3 sets of armor seal satin and a wood bowl finish. And then we have a couple of things to put in. So the draw for those, I think the prize is 2 of these, a set of 2. $19.71. 971. Here. Would you like them? Sure. We could probably get you some bags from the front cabinet. $919. $2 again. 888. 888. John Jones, would you like to finish with John? Yes. 892. 892. And 885. 885. Act this meeting. No, not a second. I'll give you another. 929. 929. Yeah. This is a high performance satin wood base and a wood base seal cell clear. John Jones, I think I'm finally done, so I think the program.
All right, thanks. And I wanted to introduce our 2 presenters tonight. But before I do, I want to tell you about a change in programs for the year 2020. Up until this year, we've been having 9 Thursday night meetings a year. We're going to 12 this year. We've been skipping Thursday night meetings in December when we had the Christmas party, when we had the symposium, and when we had the mini symposium. So we're expanding to 12 Thursday night meetings this year. We're also going to add probably 3 hands-on meetings, probably on weekdays here at Woodcraft. And tonight and in the February meeting, we're all about finishing. Tonight is finishing products, and February is finishing technique. And we're thinking, if you're interested, a week or so after our February meeting, we'll try to arrange for a hands-on meeting here on a weekday and answer questions and do demos and whatever you want to do. Does that sound like an interesting, good idea?
What time will that be?
We don't know yet.
Will it be in the morning?
We don't know yet. We don't know yet. So, hope that'll serve everybody a little bit better this year. So I want to introduce John Ogilvie and Marian Smith to you tonight. John, who is in the blue. John is a lifelong woodworker, does exceedingly beautiful work, and
finishing. He's an excellent finisher. Marian Smith, and Marian gave me more things to say about him than John did. So Marian's been doing woodworking for 83 years.
Not quite 83, but I think since I was 12 is when I started it.
He learned woodworking. His mother pushed him into woodworking when he was a kid. He's been doing furniture making for about 30 years. Grew up in Atlanta. Went to University of Georgia and Emory Law School. He's a very active member of SAFM, and he's taught at numerous places, instructed, including John C. Campbell Folk School. So tonight, they're going to concentrate on finishing products from shellac all the way up and down the line. When you want to choose this, when you want to choose that, what criteria you would use, and so forth. So with that, we just deeply appreciate you guys coming.
Glad to be here.
We're honored.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just a little bit about what my interest has been the last, I guess, 15 to 20 years. I've focused mostly on furniture, American furniture. But in addition to that, I've got exposure to cabinetry, housework. Back when I didn't have a dime, I did all my own work. I've rebuilt several offshore sailing boats. All of those things involve finish work at some point in time or another. And that's kind of my exposure to it. John?
I actually have a background. I worked in a mill workshop as a subcontractor, and then I worked for a furniture company and spray booths and so forth. So I worked for a furniture store, and basically he bought seconds and sold them as first, and we had to suck them up. And so then in the early days, we're a little bit different. Marian does shellac, primarily shellac. I do primarily lacquer and all the different forms of lacquer, from conversion varnish to and so forth, and pre-cat, all those things. So I think between the two of us, we can pretty much cover all of the finishing that's out there. You know, there's always things you don't know in finishing, and those, because it's just so much of it. But we've got a pretty good idea of most of it.
Yeah, it's a massive subject. I mean,
it's a massive subject. Both of us I have an extensive experience with grain filler. I do not like grain filler. I despise the stuff. I have years of experience with that stuff. And so Marian had actually came up with a way around that. And both of us actually utilize that now, and I'm at the point, I'm fixing to finish a pie crust table, and it's mahogany, and I've got to fill it. So I've got to fill the grain on it, and rather than the pastewood filler, it's loaded with carbon. That stuff would just obliterate that piece. So there's a technique that he's going to demonstrate or show for us that it works really well.
It's grain filling using pumice. There's several products you can use. You can use pumice. You can use rotten stone. You can use Tripoli powder, which is kind of a reddish tint to it. There's a host of those things, and you just spread it around on the surface and use a pad and thin shellac and work it down into all the pores as you go, and it smooths the surface. I'll demonstrate it the next time when we do the techniques. Yeah. But I think it is a fantastic way to fill, because you end up with a surface where the pores are filled with pumice typically, which turns clear in the presence of the shellac. It's not white looking anymore. And then you're grinding up wood fibers as you're forcing it down in the grain, which is putting basically the same color down into the little holes. And once it sets, you just clear the surface gently with a little sandpaper, and it's ready to go. What cut? Oh, well, I'm going to give you my formula, because I just take a handful of the stuff and put it in a drawer, and I put enough alcohol in there to go just a little bit over it, and keep shaking it around, and it'll come out sort of if you're using blonde, super blonde shellac, it'll come out sort of a medium yellow look to it. And so the way I do is I take it from there and cut it. And I try to get it to be, this is a little tacky, but it'll do. I try to get it to be the color of urine when you're taking vitamin pills. And then, well, pretty much. And then I take it from there when I'm going to do the fill-in work, and I cut it even more. And I try to get it to be basically the color of urine when you're not taking vitamin pills. And that formula works well for me.
Is this de-waxed shellac?
I just, super blonde, I've never had any problem one way or another whether it was waxed or de-waxed. And I hadn't had any problem with shelf life with the stuff either.
I hadn't either.
I've gone back 6 months later and pulled down one and gone to work, and it works just fine. I have had stuff that that had separated, and I pour that out.
Yeah.
No, it's this grainy stuff that forms in there. And I've also had shellac, I hadn't had it in a long time, that wouldn't dissolve. And it turns into a jelly-like substance. And it won't go through a filter, it won't do, and if it goes through a filter, if you force it through, it's little tiny beads. So if you get that, just ditch it, because you're not going to solve the problem.
The other thing you can do with it is you can take the shellac. You're doing a lot of your stain work with the shellac and the grain filling. You can, if you choose to stain the piece, if you're trying to color the piece, that is a good way to color it. And you can actually start out a good bit darker. You can mix the material up to where you're actually concerned because it's so dark. But by the time you rub it out on the piece of wood, it comes out a very pleasing color.
Yeah, it does.
And so with the second application, you could do the same thing and get just a little more. If you're concerned, if you're doing a little more filling, you can use rotten stone because it is a darker material and it's not perfectly clear. But if it's darker, it's fine. You're not going to see it. It's actually going to accentuate the grain. If it's lighter, it's horrid. It's actually just horrid. Grain filler's the same way. If you miss on the grain filler and go too light, you're going to see the grain filler in that finish. You're not going to see the finish. You're going to see the grain filler.
I think using the alternatives that I've used.
This is by far the best way to go with it. I've used enough grain filler that I would actually feel confident in saying that I'm somewhat of an expert on that. And I've used all of it. I've used the one by Sherwin-Williams. I've used the one by Mohawk. I've used the best of the best, and they're all crap. I don't mean that like it's going to sound, but they really are hard to deal with. And do the professional shops still use them? Yeah, they do. To some extent, they do. They put a wash coat on and start out with it. I had the Mohawk rep out to my shop. He's the southeastern rep, Joel Rago, and he went through it, and it's abominable. It's just absolutely horrible, and it's not consistent. And you better not get it in a carving. You better not get it in a corner of a molding.
You can't get rid of it.
You can't get rid of it. So I'm not trying to preach. This is just, he'll show you next time. This is an easy way to do it, and it's very effective. But that's the basis of the finish. And once you get from there, you can tone it, you can color it, you can do a lot of things with it. And, we'll be glad to go through repairs, touch-ups, all those sorts of things, too.
But you get a lot of, wood is not a consistent product. I mean, you get inclusions, flaws, blowout when you're working on it. There are a lot of good ways to do it. One of the things that you can do is use these shellac sticks, bomatage kind of stuff that you burn in or melt in, and you can blend the colors of it, and it does a great job. And this is all before the finish ever hits. We're just getting ready for it at this point.
We'll pass this one around, but this is just a little junk piece of mahogany, and I carved a big gouge in it. And I carbureted against the grain.
He just fixed it a little while ago right over here.
A few minutes ago, so, and that's an awfully good, by the time you finish that, you won't see that. It's just this little place right there. And we'll do it again. That's, they've made that a lot easier than it used to be also. You don't have to buy this whole kit. You can buy just the little burning tool. And this thing's the craziest thing I've ever seen. I've worn one of them out. I've used it so much. But you turn it on, and that thing will burn the crap out of you. It really gets hot, and it's only got 2 AA batteries in it. But you melt these little sticks with it. That's what you do. I can get one. I don't have any fingernails.
I get it.
There we go. But you can, and that's what I filled that with. It doesn't take it very long to get hot. See, it's already melting it. You just melt the things in there, and it'll dry almost immediately. I wouldn't buy all these colors. I would probably buy this unit.
Who sells that, John?
Mohawk.
Oh, Mohawk.
Southern Paint and Lacquer sells it. Yeah. And then you just take a card scraper or something similar to that and just pull across it. It's already set up. Just clean it up with a card scraper, and you're good to go. That's all there is to it. I mean, that's as easy as it gets. No melting this and melting that.
When I first got out of service back in '67, I worked for GE Auto Products up in Decatur, Illinois. Like a black box technician type thing, but they had cabinet repairmen up there, and they used those things all constantly.
Yeah, I've used it for years.
Battery operated stuff. They had knives that they had in.
They had burning knives.
Well, they were black-bladed knives, and they had them inside a heater.
Right.
Well, I'm not
I
as
have
sophisticated.
that same system, and you push it, you put it in there, you pull it out. You got to use burn-in balm before you put it on there. You put a waxy type substance on there, and it's tricky. If you're not careful, you'll burn the wood. You'll never burn the wood with this. You can have. I tell you what. Well, I built houses for my career, a lot of them, about 1,200 houses, and every one of them, they pull the dishwashers, they pull the stoves out, and they just obliterate the hardwood floor. I fixed every one of them. I mean, and quickly. So that's a good tool. It gets, if you've got a gouge or something like that, there's a host of other things. But
And the burning sticks some of them are that long.
Yeah.
And they come in a lot of colors. And my experience with it is, I take my blowtorch and set it right here, turn it on. Use a palette knife, stick it in there. When it gets red, I cut a little off, come over here and stick it down. It works great. And then just same thing, scrape it off.
How does it harden?
It's shellac. This is, you know what shellac flakes are? Well, this is the same thing except it's a stick and it's got color in it. And so as soon as it cools down, it's hard.
I'll bring some of these next time too, but they're also, they call them blend-all sticks. They're glorified crayons, really.
Yeah, they're soft.
They are soft, but if you sand through a sanding sealer, you sand through your finish, you can take those things and color it right out. It's just amazing. You just drag it across there lightly and then put a coat of sealer on it.
Are you guys using gradient pens for those too? Because that's one thing I have a problem with, is you can't match the grains, and I don't know how to do that.
I don't use a graining pen because the things are $6 a piece and they dry out in about 2 weeks. And I take an artist brush and I take some pretty heavy glazes and things like that. I got little bits of that sort of stuff, and then I actually grain it that way. You can do it a lot quicker.
And I do similar, but I use an artist brush, and I will use blonde shellac, very thin.
Yeah.
And you got to do it real thin because shellac does what they call fat edge. It puts a little ring around it. So real thin, and that fat edge won't show up. And then I just dampen the brush and pick up a little bit of pigment, dry pigment, and then I can just paint it in. I took some inclusions about that big on crotch walnut, got the general color, and then came back in and painted all the design of the crotch stuff into it. You can't even see it's there. So Just a, you know, a little bit of thinking will get you through most of it. Another.
Also can take powdered stains, those powdered.
Yeah, that's what I'm
and
talking about.
And then it's the same thing. You can actually do those with your hand and then seal them too.
Another thing you can do is you can take sawdust from your work, and I've got little, I save medicine bottles. I'm an old man. I got lots of medicine bottles around the house, so, and I just save sawdust in them, and then I'll take that and mix it with a little bit of hide glue, fill the hole with that, and it'll end up getting pretty darn close to the original stuff because you're using basically the same wood, and it'll take color if you have to use color.
That works extremely well.
That's sanding dust.
Yes,
Yeah.
but the hide, if you use yellow glue, you got a dead spot. It's never going to color. But if you use hide glue, it'll color.
I'll bring a piece
Hide
next.
got it's like brown, it's like a.
No, it's sort of a beige, real light tan. It dries pretty much clear.
Whatever the pigment is, you want to, but it puts it in there because it's natural, right?
Well,
Natural hide glue. Can you use the Typon's got a hide glue?
I think there's several commercial liquid ones. I've got a box of crystals, and I just put some in a jar and put a little water and it absorbs the water, and then put it in my glue pot and it turns liquid.
I'll bring a spice cabinet next time. It's got a bunch of crotch walnut on the fronts of the drawers, and every one of them's been filled just the way Marion's talking about with hide glue.
You won't see it.
You can't see them. I mean, and they've got that stuff. It was a beautiful crotch walnut, but it had a lot of checks in it, and I just thought, and some of them developed even after I applied it, but and it was homemade veneer. But
those checks get dark. I mean, are they dark to black? Or are they?
No, they're just open. They're just cracks, and I just filled them. And I filled them with hide glue and sawdust. Well, sanding dust, walnut sanding dust.
Yes, you got to have pretty smooth, fine stuff.
Yeah.
You're saying you can use hot glue or the
I've used both.
Yeah, you could use.
You got the commercial stuff. I heat the commercials. What the one old brown?
Yeah.
I stick it in my glue pot with water. And I think it leaves the open times a little better.
Yeah. And hot hide glue is all I've ever used, but it works perfectly.
Fine Woodworking did a study several years ago on glues, the whole spectrum of them, and basically they all had about the same tensile strength. They're all stronger than the wood, and so the wood's going to fail first on almost all of them.
When you get it in there and you're trying to smooth it out, you're probably going to take a card scraper. It's that hard. It's not going to be something you can sand. I couldn't sand mine. Could you? Yours? I had to take a card scraper and pull them down.
It's hard.
It's just that hard.
Where?
Oh, I need to go down. I'm sorry.
Well, I can't see that anyway, but I got this one here. There's some other things that are on this outline about grain filler, pumice block using boiled linseed oil, and you just do, and you're filling it basically with a mixture of linseed oil and grindings off of the surface of the wood. The problem with boiled linseed oil is that it turns dark. It will turn. I should have brought it, but I've got a can that I've had for ages, and I use it for some things, but the whole rim of it is just as black as it can be, and that's what happens to it. And well, I'll get to the finish, and then I'll deal with that then. Talk about the color next, and let's talk about no color. Can you get to those few pieces of furniture?
Sure.
There's benefit to not using any color, but you got to plan it. It's helpful. Let's see what we get up here. It's helpful to be able to build a piece out of wood from the same tree, preferably the same log, and maybe even the same board. Okay. There you go. Okay, that's a small walnut sideboard, early Georgia piece, and that is the governor's mansion where it's taken, and the original is there, and it's the only Georgia piece they have. That's why I wanted to build it. There's not one bit of color added to that. That's walnut. The veneer, the front of it, except for the legs, it's all veneers and inlay. The inlay, the two doors, the veneers are successive cuts. I got about 8 of them and built several pieces like this. The drawer is, again, successive cuts, so it's easy book match. And the whole thing comes together without any dye, stain, or anything. But I'll tell you what I did, and it works very well on walnut, and it's what I do with walnut all the time now, is I put orange shellac on it and do a couple of coats of that, and then come back and finish it up by, I do that with a foam brush, and then come back and finish it up by French polishing technique and using blonde shellac and build it right up to the level of finish you want to get it to. And they come out looking like that. Go to that's a mahogany piece that there has no color in it, but it's built out of 2 boards. One of them is the one that the case is made out of, and most of the feet and base molding and stuff, and the other one is the one the boards are made out of, and I was just fortunate that I got 2 that went pretty well together. And that's got a little bit of garnet shellac as a base, and then it's blonde shellac after that. And the colors just match right up. We got another one here. That's the top of a pair of chests that are kind of book matched all the way around, and they have no color added. And you get this when you start dealing with book matching. The colors aren't going to be the same. The opposite sides of the cut are going to show the color differently. And I don't know any way to get around it. But and you look at the front in the next picture. Yeah. That's the same again, no color. All it is orange shellac and blonde shellac to produce the color. And that's filled with the pumice method right there. And there's one other one. That is recycled longleaf yellow pine that came out of a warehouse in Cleveland, Ohio, that was shipped up there sometime around 1870. It has no color added. It's just those old boards. Now, they don't look like that when you're doing it, but that's what they end up looking like. And it's got orange shellac on it and then blonde shellac, and that's it. My house is relatively low traffic. I don't have any children at home. My children are in their 50s. And my only grandchild lives in California, so she's not there to wear things out. So shellac holds up pretty well at my place.
You speak of orange shellac, garnet shellac. Are you speaking of flakes that you mix up prior to use?
Yeah, I mean, you can get it mixed up, but I just find it so much easier. It's just better. After you use this stuff for a little while, you get used to reaching over here and getting some, and then pouring in there and getting it to a consistency that you like to work in. and then go with it. And you don't have to mix it up, have it sitting on the shelf for months and months and months. They say 6 months is the shelf life. I've never had a problem with it, but I'm aware of what people say, and it's just easier.
It is easy.
And the flakes don't wear out.
Yeah. And everything sticks to shellac, and shellac sticks to everything.
You mentioned orange and bond shellac. In the sequence, when do you fill the pores with the pumice?
When do you fill the pores?
With the pumice
First.
and then you do the orange.
Then do the orange.
Yeah.
Then the working a pad, you don't have to do that. You can treat this stuff just like you would some varnish. You can sand it, get it flat that way, go back over it and rub it out like you would varnish on a piece of furniture.
So you do use the flakes, or I'm a little bit confused?
That's the only thing I use.
That's all we both
You
use.
dissolve it with a denatured alcohol?
I don't ever buy canned shellac.
I use the shellac, and then once I get the color and all in the piece, I go to lacquer. I have used lacquer a long time. And for period furniture, I use Mohawk Buff Coat lacquer. It's natural cellulose lacquer is designed for the old look. You can also use, if you're in a wet area, you can use pre-cat, which is pre-cat lacquer. You can use post-cat lacquer. You add a catalyst to those. And you can use conversion varnish. Conversion varnish is the hard one. It's really a hard finish. But those, I'll go over those at some point if anybody's interested. That's more of an industrial finish than it would be something you put in your house.
That's what you did.
That's what I've done, yeah. I still use it, yeah. So you've got both cases here. This is the prettier finish. It's a shellac finish. This is the prettier finish. It's a clearer finish than mine. I'll tell you that in a whole. Al Breed came down and looked at this thing and he said, it looks commercial. You know.
Well, I won't tell you what he said about mine. It embarrassed me.
But it's a good finish, and I'm used to spraying a finish. The other thing some advantages you have with it, when you got a stack of drawers like you had in those chests and all, how many times have you seen a picture of those? One of the darn drawers is a little bit different color, or a lot of different colors. I mean, it's just not the same color. That's a shame, because that's the easiest thing in the world to fix. You tone them. If you're using a spray application, I take a little bit of lacquer thinner, a little bit of dye stain, put in there to match the color. And don't get that next to the thing. This is one of the few cases that you spray from a distance. Get back about 2 feet and fog that thing on until you've matched it. It's going to flatten the finish, and then you put a sealer coat on it, and it's going to be an exact match. It's scary how easy that is, and how quick it is.
You're atomizing it, I guess.
Well, it's not even, you wouldn't have to do that. If you had more talent like Marian has, you could put it on with a brush.
Well, there's another aspect.
I'm just lazy.
Toning is an important aspect of it, and
Why don't you give a definition of toning?
that's changing the color subtly.
How, though, is what I'm saying.
I'm gonna.
What kind of alcohol do you use for your shellac?
You know, I wrote an article on that not too long ago. I think people who read it just kind of glazed over when about the second paragraph. But I try to find ethanol that is denatured with 5% or less methanol.
That's a good point.
There's
That
some
methanol-
studies that have been done,
Yeah.
and you may know about some of this. Methanol, which is the denaturing agent, is a very serious poison.
Yes.
Half an ounce of it can blind you. You also methanol, yeah. No, ethanol is okay. That's what you make a martini out of.
An awful lot of the alcohol that you buy has a lot of methanol.
Well,
in it.
some of it is all methanol,
Yeah.
and
Be careful.
there's some studies that show that you can absorb that stuff by breathing the fumes, and you can absorb it through your skin. They found that some nurses working with the stuff were getting bad headaches and vision problems, and did some studies from it to determine it's dangerous to work with that stuff in strong concentration. So I stay away from it.
To avoid all that, I switched to grain alcohol.
Yeah, that works
That's the
too.
safe thing to do.
But you got to pay tax on it.
Yeah,
It's a whiskey store.
Yeah, I'll go through that. What you would, they sell all this, and they sell it in different sheens. The most common sheen you see is 20 sheen, which is it's sort of a dull rub. This is a 20 sheen right here. That's closer to a 40 sheen. That's more of a semi-gloss. Okay, but pre-cat lacquer is used in applications, kitchen cabinets, bathroom cabinets, where you've got wet areas that have a lot high humidity levels. Nitrocellulose lacquer, which is what this buff coat is, will not hold up in those. It turns sort of a yellow. It'll get to it like you would with alcohol and shellac.
Oh, you don't do though.
You just don't do it. But this is great for furniture that's sitting in your living room, your dining room, your kitchen cabinets. Your kitchen cabinets are either going to be pre-cat lacquer, post-cat lacquer, or conversion varnish. These companies like Timberlake that make those, and I made it for 3.5 years. I built these big fancy $5,000 range hoods that went in these Timberlake cabinets out in Brookhaven and Buckhead and these places. I was supposed to use conversion varnish on those. That stuff is, conversion varnish is fine if you've got a really good spray booth. I have a good spray booth, but not good enough. Conversion varnish doesn't dry quite as quickly as lacquer, so you pick up dust and stuff with that. And you don't, in those applications, you don't want to have to rub it, to try to rub those nibs and stuff out. And so I actually used pre-cat lacquer, all that. A lot of those were painted. They also sell, in that case, you don't use sanding sealer, you use what's called a vinyl sealer. And it's in some of these schedules. You use a vinyl sealer. It acts a lot like sanding sealer. That's how you get it real smooth. And if it's a colored piece, if it's actually something that's a blue cabinet or a white cabinet or something, the color's in that sanding sealer or that vinyl sealer. And then you put a clear coat on top of it, just like a car. You put a clear coat on top of it. When you go from pre-cat lacquer is the one that these custom cabinet shops are primarily using. There are a few of them using conversion varnish. The next step beyond that is what they call post-cat. Versalac is the one that's what Mohawk calls it. That post-cat is actually, you catalyze it in your shop, and it's good for several days. I can't remember how long it's good for. The finish is not quite as clear on it, and then you go to the next step, which is just conversion varnish, and you actually have to catalyze each bunch. The next day, you got to throw it away. So don't leave it in a pressure pot or something like that, because that's the end of the pot or any of your lines. You got to flush it out. That stuff has got a pretty nasty smell to it too, and it is hard as a rock. It is really, really hard. So that's the 4 examples that I know of.
I'll give you a little bit different slant on it. With the shellac, if you've got a high traffic area like a dining room table or something in an entrance hall where things are going to be going on and off of it, you can toughen it up by putting a final coat of just plain old varnish on it.
Mm-hmm. That's a good way to go.
If you do it right, you got to get a surface ready for it. So you're going to have to sand the shellac to give something for the varnish to latch onto, because it won't stick to a slick surface. Oh,
320?
320, 220, somewhere around there. Either of those will do.
Those little foam back pads that come in rolls, those are extremely good. And then you get to molded surfaces, pay the bucks and get the ones that are they've got the abrasive adhered to a foam, to an actual, I'll bring some of it in. But use that on your moldings because it's not going to scratch through. It's not going to go through your finish.
You know, if you use varnish, it's going to be way too shiny when it cures, and it's very slow curing. I mean,
it is.
Varnishes are typically made from an oil. More often than not, it would be linseed oil. They make some using tung oil, a variety of things, but that oil's got to cure, polymerize, turn hard. So they have an oil in them. They'll have some sort of a resin. Alkyd resins are probably the most popular now. They used to use other vegetable resins in the past, and in the past they would add turpentine to it because they didn't have mineral spirits way back. And today they use a mineral spirits base. And then they put a drying agent in there. In the old days it would have been red or white lead salts. Today they use non-poisonous metal salts that will cause the stuff to polymerize quickly. But that means the lead, they use it in paint too. So the old lead-based paint is the same thing. It's an oil, it's pigment, it's lead salts is what they used to use in them, and it speeds up the curing process and it makes it turn harder.
It lasts better outside too.
But it takes time.
When you saying varnish, are you saying polyurethane?
No, but polyurethane is a varnish.
It sounds like what you described.
Well, that they use urethane and polyurethane, multiple urethanes, in the mixture as the resin.
The varnish is not.
No, the one I'm talking about has got alkyd resins in it. Polyurethane has urethane and polyurethane resins. I mean, they're basically both varnishes. And without getting too esoteric about this, if you go way back in time, when the varnishes first started in the 1500s, the same general concept, some kind of what they call fixed oil, which would one that would polymerize, some kind of a resin. They use that, what's the blonde stuff that gets the bugs in it? Amber, that's one. Copal. There are a bunch of vegetable resins that they use, and then they would put some turpentine to thin it out, and then they put it on and it would cure up. That's what they started doing musical instruments with. It's that same general product has marched through time to today. There are a host of different resins that are being used in them. You got the urethanes and the polyurethanes and the alkyds. I got to think of this. There are well, no, it's not. Benjamin Moore's got it. Most paint, Sherwin-Williams has got it. They've all got alkyd varnishes. Well, it's the same. It's got.
It's just a pigmented version of varnish. That's all it is.
It's just pigmented.
Yeah. The thing about the varnish also, you can't use that stuff out of the can.
You got to thin it up.
Number one, don't ever apply it when it's cold. Make sure it's this kind of temperature that you've got in room temperature, 70 degrees, 65 degrees, something like that. Secondly, you need to thin it out to a sweet spot. That stuff out of the can is, I don't know.
It's too stiff.
It's way too stiff. You're going to have brush marks, and Marian's got some good techniques. I spray. He's got some real good techniques for eliminating the brush marks.
Well, one of the simplest ones is to take a little piece of this kind of stuff, fold it up, maybe 4 layers thick, this big, put a little bit of, you can put a little Penetrol on it, just rub it, gloss the surface after you've sanded it and cleaned it, just where it just sort of glows, lay the varnish down, it'll go dead flat every time. Bam.
Penetrol.
Penetrol with the varnish on the pen?
No, just
Penetrol's a prep.
put it on there, just shine the surface with it. You don't want a lot, just a tiny bit. Penetrol. And you can do, if you don't have any Penetrol, try it with a little bit of mineral spirit. Same concept. You're not trying to wet it, you're just trying to make it glossy looking. And you put the varnish right over it and it'll settle right down.
Here's another thing too, and we do need to cover this. Nitrocellulose lacquer and shellac. You can put one coat right on top of the other if you so desired. I mean, you could scuff sand it. These others, pre-cat lacquer, post-cat lacquer, conversion varnish, polyurethane varnish, any kind of varnish, you've got to scuff the surface up, but that stuff's not going to adhere.
It won't stick to it.
It will not stick to it if you don't scuff the surface up.
There's an exception to it.
Okay.
If you get into the two-part urethane varnishes and paints, you can go, and the clear that goes with them, you can go spray a coat, come right back over it as soon as it sets, spray another coat.
You can do that.
And
yes.
you got a 24-hour window on most of them. And as long as we're talking varnish for a second, some of what we're saying is, it's applicable to furniture, but it's applicable to lots of other places. You run into an inside-outside issue. There's a lot of stuff people make that goes outside and is going to be exposed to weather. Indoor varnishes don't hold up very well out there.
They do not.
Well, I've got a lot of marine varnish experience, and I'll tell you, marine varnish is great stuff. It's what they call a long oil varnish, which means it's got more oil in it than the indoor stuff does. But and that's for flexibility. It also has UV filters built into it. And as they absorb ultraviolet rays to keep it from beating up the underlying surface and beating up the varnish, it turns dark. And if you don't believe me, come to my house, because I used it on 2 pieces of furniture and they're so dark you can barely see the wood. So be careful about that. There's an interesting product that I've used, and it's the toughest outdoor transparent finish that I've ever used. And it's made down in Florida, and the name of the product is Bristol Finish, and it's a multi-part product that you mix and you put it on, and the end result, when you do it right, it looks exactly like varnish has been put on it. But when you open the can, you're going to say that guy in Atlanta was crazy, because it doesn't look like that's what's going to happen. It's sort of almost like the color of coffee with cream in it, a lot of cream. It's funny looking stuff, but when you put it on, it goes amber like varnish. And it outweighs varnish about 5 to 1. So if this is sitting on a wood on the outside of a boat where it's getting all day sun, rain, everything known to mankind, and it will last 4 or 5 years under those circumstances.
Awesome.
And varnish, regular varnish, you're lucky to get 18 months wear out of it. So my cousin used it on his windows on the outside of his house when he redid them, and they don't get the kind of sun that a boat would get, but that stuff's been on there over 5 years now, and it looks like it's brand new.
That's awesome.
But it's sort of an amber color like you would expect varnish to be after you put it on. If you put 4 or 5 coats of varnish on, it's going to impart some tone to it, and it does almost identically. And you don't have to sand between coats either. You've got a window that you've got to stay within, but what they do is they tell you put 5 coats on, sand it flat, put a final coat on, it's done. Bristol Finish. It smells funny too, by the way. Any marine store probably will have it, and if you don't, just look it up on the internet.
Larry, how about the safety factor with working with the varnishes, like if you're in your basement or something like that, and you have a hot water heater that's gas in the room?
You know, you can, I wouldn't work right up next to it, I'll tell you that. Is the hot water heater gas?
Yeah.
I'd be real cautious about that.
I haven't done any finishing in there.
But you got the same issue with most of the thinners and solvents. Alcohol is explosive. Mineral spirits certainly is. Lacquer thinner. You know, you put a hole in the lacquer thinner can next to the hot water heater, you blow your house up.
Sure would. All the stuff that we spray, I have a commercial spray booth, and I'm spraying it right into a commercial. And the lights are sealed off. The blower, there's a 24-inch blower in it. It's in its own separate room, and I'm very careful about if you actually start doing electrical close to it and all, you need to use Class 1 Division 1 explosion-proof fixtures and all that.
I was going to ask about it, since we're talking about safety, what do you use for lung safety beard?
What I use for
Lung safety when you have a beard.
what I don't have my spray booth is pretty good, and my main problem with the spray booth is actually it's loud. That blower is loud, and I do use earplugs. I should use a respirator, and yes, with a beard, you really should just shave the beard. It's far less effective if you. I sweat in those things, and that sweat gets on the. If I'm doing a tabletop, and you know that's tricky at best, and you know you've got to half laugh that thing when you go across it. You know you got to stay. If you got to be on the machine, you've got to stay exactly the right height so that you're getting a full wet coat, and then the next coat that you come back across, you stop each time when you go back and forth. And when you start back across, you don't start a whole new thing. You start halfway in. You only. And yeah, you have to do that. And the top is the last thing you spray. You spray everything else first. But I try to spray from the back of the booth. I have used turntables. Those turntables are very effective. I change the filters often. The filter media for the back of the booth is dirt cheap. I don't know why everybody. I see some of those things are awful looking. That stuff, I bought 100 pieces of it for, what was it, $30, $40. And so I used to try to blow it out and clean it. I finally I just throw it away. And I do have filter media in the doors to the booth too. I bought that booth from a commercial outfit. The whole thing was about $3,000. So it's not an expensive booth. It's 8 feet high. It's 12 feet deep by 10 feet wide. It has a double doors on the front of it. But it's, I do a lot of spraying. I did a lot of spraying. Well, I did work for Timberlake for the last, for 3.5 years there, and every one of those things went through the booth. But I did use a lot of caution with that. I have worked for companies. Fox Manufacturing was one of them, and I really had almost a collapse lung situation from their booth. Just wasn't good. They didn't have enough makeup air, and that thing didn't have good suction. So you got to be careful. Another thing with the lacquer thinner, there's a bunch of grades of lacquer thinner. A lot of people will buy what they call a wash thinner, a wash grade lacquer thinner to clean up with. Don't do it. Just buy they make a 610. It's only $2 or $3 more a gallon, and just use it for everything. When you use it as a reducer on stains, all those different things you use it for. Just use the real McCoy. Don't buy wash thinners. They're gonna make you turn your hands white. They just do awful stuff to you. It ain't worth the $3. The other thing about lacquer and spraying lacquer and lacquer materials is there's always the blushing, and what you have trouble with blushing with lacquer in high humidity days. It's raining outside. It's a typical Georgia summer day, and you got all this humidity, and you're gonna have to put retarder in the lacquer. You're gonna have to add a small amount of retarder to the lacquer, about 4 or 5%, something like that. It still flows well. If you still have a corner or something that blushes or something like that, granted, the next coat would probably dissolve it, but they have a product called Blush Eliminator. And you can get back, that's one of the few things you fog on too. Everything else you spray close to the piece, but those you actually get back and you just hit the corner of it and it goes right away. So there's a lot of little ancillary products that are used with this stuff.
Yeah, that's one of the advantages to shellac.
Yeah.
If it fogs, you just go to the other room, go have a cup of coffee, and come back, and it'll be gone.
It'll be gone.
But don't keep working.
No.
No, just walk away from it. It'll clear.
The same thing's true of lacquer. If you start blushing, leave it alone. Do not put another coat on that day. Set it aside. If you've got a spray booth, leave the stuff in the spray booth. Leave it right outside the spray booth, either one, and wait till the next day. Scuff sand it, start all over again. Just keep going. But if you'll make it considerably worse, and you'll have a whole lot of problems if you try to keep coating it if it has blush. It's telling you something. It's trapped water in the finish. You better leave
That's
it
what
alone.
it is.
And give it a fresh start the next day. Yes, sir.
If that happens, what do you go down to? You go down to 80, go to, what grid are you going down to read?
Oh, no. You're using 320.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
What I'm using is 320.
You're knocking that back off.
Do you know what you can buy? It's in a box about this big, and they're little pads. They've got serrations. You pull them apart. That's what I'll use those with blocks, without blocks, and all that sort of thing. I use those a lot. You also, if you're having trouble with them loading a little bit, you can sit there. You can actually take an air compressor, a gun, and blow them off a little bit. And
This is like kind of like I guess, well, the drywallers using what?
Similar, yeah.
It's similar. Okay.
But the other product that you've got is it's actually a little piece of, I don't know, rubber for.
It's a foam back kind of.
Yeah, it's actually the adhesive is stuck to the. I'll bring some next time, and it's a different product, but use those on your moldings, because the ones I'm talking about, if you start trying to work those into your moldings, it'll sand the color. You'll go through the finish. I can't remember what you call them. So I'll bring some next time. Who? I'm glad you brought that up. A Merca sander, a Merca pneumatic sander, that's the coolest thing that was ever created on the planet. I'm telling you. That's just, there's two different orbits. I'd use the higher orbit. But that thing, those things, not the electric ones, the pneumatic ones, and they're a hog for air. You need a decent sized compressor to push them. But those things, they beat anything I've ever seen. I'll bring it next time too. But it's just a random orbit sander is what it is. But for surface prep, before I start finishing, those are what I use. I'm just going to admit this because it's not something that a lot of people think is very cool. I almost never scrape anything. I use Merca sanders, and I'm just admitting it. I mean, I've built a lot of nice furniture, but if you're doing production work, you're not doing a lot of that.
No, I scrape everything, but I'm not doing any production work.
And that's the difference in the two finishes. That's one reason we did this. This is truly a spectacular finish. This is a good finish. That's really, I wouldn't say much more than that about it. And I know that. I'm fine with that. In my house, it's okay. And I'm shifting more toward this than I am this. Another thing about the finish is the thickness of the finish. Don't let yourself be fooled to thinking you can go in there and to fill the grain on walnut and mahogany and use a bunch of coats of sanding sealer. It isn't going to work out for you. I have done that. I have plenty of pieces that have that because I hated grain filler so badly. You're sanding almost all of it back off each time, and it's incredibly laborious. You will just get so sick of it you can scream. But it also is creating a thicker finish, and this is just an absolute paper thin finish. The thinner the finish, the better the finish is. That's going to sound funny, but it's true. A thicker finish is not a better finish. It really is not a better finish.
And I have one thing else here. Where did this go to?
Uh-oh, red alert.
I don't know I'm out of my element with all this gear.
It's probably feedback. There we go.
lot of the finishes, if you just are going to produce high gloss results, varnish is one, shellac one, lacquer that isn't dulled down will do the same thing. You can get the result of a softer gloss several ways. You can take a high gloss and rub it out, and that's what I normally do, and I can produce whatever end finish I want to see. The alternate, I beg your pardon?
What do you mean by running out?
Well, you can, one way you can do it is get some very fine steel wool. 4/0 Lebron is what I use.
Lebron, that's about,
I won't use any, the others are not nearly as fine.
they're terrible.
You can also use powdered pumice, 4F pumice, rotten stone, and you can work through a progression of it if you like. I do that sometimes. It's incredibly laborious. No, I use either water or I use paraffin oil. Or dry.
There's also a
Dry will get you the highest shine.
There's also
Water
a product
next, oil last.
called wool wax, and you mix water with it, and that'll act as a lubricant too.
Yeah. The alternative to that is to buy or use what are referred to as rubbed effect varnishes or lacquer, but you need to understand how they are made and what they do. And
They add stearates to them is what they do. They come in 20 sheen, 40 sheen, 60 sheen, and 80 sheen. 80 sheen is high gloss. 40 sheen is a semi-gloss. It's about this gloss. But this is a 20 sheen. But they actually put stearates in them, and you have to stir them up. You have to, or if anybody, if you're doing any lacquers and things like that, there is a poor man's shaker, paint shaker. I don't know if you've seen them. They're about 130 or 40 bucks. They're pneumatic. Yeah, they're cute. You know, they'll shake gallons and quarts, and if I don't, you know, if I've got fives, I pour them off to ones and just use it. But the thing works great. You have to, you know, put oil in it every once in a while. But you'll have to agitate those. You'll have to shake them up. And the other thing too is if you're actually spraying lacquer for an extended period of time, don't be fooled and go to lunch and come back and keep using that spray pot or that gravity gun or whatever you're using. It's going to settle out. You're going to have to stir it again.
yeah, when you use that, or when you add it, because you can buy this stuff and add it.
Again, I've actually got some of
It's
it.
not completely colloidal. It doesn't stay suspended. It's
Not indefinitely. It'll stay suspended for an hour or two, but if you're spraying all day like a lot of times I was, I'd have to stir it a couple of times a day. I'd take the pressure pot lid off and just stir it up. Another thing about lacquers and probably varnish and shellac and all that, you need to be filtering that stuff.
Yeah, all of it you
All
need to
of it has
filter.
You buy those cone filters by 100, and then you take those things, if you take a piece of plywood and cut it so that it'll go on top of either your pressure pot or something you're going to be pouring out of, and just pour that thing in. Now, a lot of the gravity guns actually have filters in them. If you see, there's those plastic cups that are disposable for gravity guns. Those actually have a little filter in them, but you've got to filter it. If you don't, that crap's going right on your finish. It's going right through your
It's going to
gun.
be a nib that you're going to have to rub out.
Yes, sir.
The-
And that's another thing. If you get a nib or an insect, or you get all that stuff sooner or later. If you get that, leave it.
Yeah, don't mess
try
with
to
it.
deal with it when you don't go over here and try to rub that thing out. It's incredible how hard that is to resist sometimes. You know, if a gnat or something gets in there, and try to avoid it to start with. But if you get it, you're gonna have to leave it alone and fix it later.
Just let it glue itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'll scrape right off. Don't worry about it.
The only thing I won't scrape right off is what I call nibs or particulates, some kind of particulate.
The rubbed effect things, the additives that make them dull down, essentially scatter the light. That's what they do. You don't get a clean reflection, and they're solid little pieces of stuff like silica glass or something.
Stearate, yeah.
You don't put 3 coats of that on there. That's my view.
I agree.
Put the clear, shiny stuff down first. Last coat is the stuff that is the rubbed effect. Because if you build up 3 coats, you're going to obscure the wood underneath it, because it's, you know, that scatter effect works both ways. And the more of it you've got, the less clear the substrate is going to be.
What was your question?
If the minutes aren't prepared.
Quick question for you.
Just
You were talking about buying hummus, good ethanol.
If they're not very bad, let it dry.
Well,
Then just come send it with 320.
I got to remember, clean strip green is what I buy.
I hadn't thought of that. I wouldn't be scared about pieces of paper in it.
And the regular clean strip is methanol. Clean strip green is like 90 or 95% ethanol and 5% methanol. And there's some other brands out there, but clean strip green seems to be what I can find. Home Depot has it most of the time. Any hardware store, just go in there and get some 4F pumice.
You can buy it here.
Yeah, it's 4F is
No
the
more
fine
than you're gonna
grade.
use. You could buy it here just fine. Okay. I bought mine here.
The thing that's bothering me, I keep thinking about it, it keeps going back over my mind. Okay, so how do you deal with the molding and the fencing when you're finishing that top?
There we go, good. The fencing's the one, the molding's easy.
It's the molding is not hard. Dealing with that gallery going around there, it's a nightmare basically. You've got, I mean, it's all worked with a pad or rubber, whatever you call it. That's the way I did the whole. You make little teeny ones. I mean, they're this big, and you get in there and you go do this, and a point on the end so you can get close in, and you float it, and even after rubbing it out and everything, if you get the light on there, you can see that it's got some small irregularities.
Another way is an airbrush. You can take an airbrush and use it too. Yeah, that's what I do.
And let me give you one other thing on that. This is something you can use in lots of different applications. Cutting this stuff out is stressful and time consuming, and you do the best you can of sticking tight on the lines and getting clean cuts. But you know, with those little scroll saw blades, it's not so easy sometimes.
Separately and then apply, you wouldn't have to have it finished on the underside where it be glued down.
Well, you're only talking about a 1/16 of an inch by a quarter that's down in the groove. It's not much. But when you start finishing it, unless you want to sit there, they're actually 1,492 cuts in the fretwork on this thing. And I was bored one afternoon. Actually, I did some multiplication, if you want to know the truth. And I wasn't going to sit there with an emery board and a teeny little fingernail file and file every one of those damn things flat. It's just not going to happen in my house. So I started thinking about it, and I'd done some other stuff before, and there's a product called shellac flat. And what it is, comes in a bottle. You can get it on the internet. You can get it at a lot of woodworking stores. It is shellac. It's thinned back, and it has alabaster powder in it. And it does the same thing as the cerates. It causes the light not to reflect back. So you go in and paint the inside of it with that stuff. So the inside's not reflecting light back. You can't see any irregularities in the cut. It looks smooth as glass when you look at it.
It looks beautiful.
Do you mask off the other surfaces when you're doing the fencing?
No.
One other good point, everybody knows this probably, you got to coat everything. You coat the inside, you coat the underside, you coat it all. If you don't, you're gonna have trouble. You know, if you go on the inside or the back of this thing, I mean, no, it's not gonna have this kind of finish, but that's one of the first things I take care of. It all needs to be sealed, yeah. It really
Raise
does
up and
need.
down the same.
Well, yeah,
What was an issue we were talking about that before you?
I built this, there's expansion and contraction built all over this piece.
There is this one too. I didn't use the old traditional thing. I use I call them table clamps. Those little, you run a groove around the sides on the inside. And they're the easiest thing in the world. They're metal. And I buy them 400 or 500 at a time. Yeah, and it puts it under a little bit of compression.
This one is, this is just a block of wood
Same thing.
glued onto it
Yeah.
with an oval hole. The screw goes up the middle so it can go that way, and it's all the way around. Same thing.
Probably sell them here, they sell them in Rockford.
They sell them everywhere. What you don't want to do, that top was, well, I mean, we both got the same situation. That's a solid board. That's all one board. It's not glued up. It wouldn't matter if it was glued up, but you don't want to put that thing where it's not able to expand and contract.
Oh, you can find them.
You can find them. They're not that hard to find.
Yeah, I always do.
What kind of filter?
Just one of those
cone
paper
filters.
cone filters with, looks like hose or something. It's just a fine mesh at the bottom.
Yeah.
Pour it through.
Yeah, paint filter. Those things, you've got to do that. If you don't do that, it's just, there is particulate and all that stuff. Even the stuff you buy from these companies, it's the same thing. I promise you, it all has it. Especially the ones when they're adding stearates to them to tone down the gloss.
Cheesecloth works well too.
Beg pardon?
Cheesecloth layered up works well too.
You could use cheesecloth as well. I just use the paint filters because they're easy.
And they just throw, they don't cost anything.
I buy them by the hundred, from Southern Paint and Lacquer. Yeah. They're also different quality of rags too, for what it's worth. Buy the good ones if you're doing a really nice piece of furniture. The good ones, they cost a little more. They're about twice the price of the others, but they're not expensive either way. But there is a difference. So some of those things, I guess the Goodwill ones aren't too great.
Those conical filters are also good for when you have kidney stones.
They sure are. That's what the doctor had me use. Oh yeah, there it is.
Oh, we didn't really get to this. Toning.
Yeah.
They make a lot of commercial stuff. Toners that you can go buy. A lot of them are gummy, thick things that build up. You get in the carving, gets in the corners. Can't get. What I do is I use Trans-Tint, and I mix it with shellac, and I apply it just like I would the other shellac, except, for example, if you use the color triangle, are y'all familiar with the color triangle? Okay, you got three primary colors. Yeah, and then you got the two in the between, and whoever's on the opposite side is what you correct with. And I work with a lot of mahogany, and I tend to get this maybe too red sometimes. I don't think that one is, but sometimes it happens. And so I have a supply. This isn't mine. This is here. There's one. There's your correction for mahogany getting too red. It's green. And the first time you put green shellac on top of your work, you're going to probably have to go to lunch before you do it, because it is really difficult to accept it until you actually see it working. It doesn't happen. You do this, use thin color and do it gradually. Don't just go diving off with a dark green something. Little bit at a time, and you'll work up to it, and you'll get the color you're looking for. No, just use it. What I use is I use a unbleached muslin. It's a thin fabric, and I use surgical sponges. And I just
Buy those, they're very
they're dirty. On the internet, buy a million of them. I've got 2 lifetime supplies of them from one order.
And eBay's a great place to buy them.
And you just chop off a piece, and you fold it up. Try to get one end kind of pointed, one end kind of rounded, and pull the muslin over it. And then you charge it. You just put some alcohol and shellac in there and tighten, turn it down where it's nice and tight. I suggest you wear rubber gloves or something. And then you hold it and you just apply it. And you come back, you put some more on there. I use squeeze bottles. Go, when it starts dragging a little bit or something, go again. And toward the end, you find yourself making long sweeping moves, almost like you're spraying, because you want nice uniform stuff, and overlap a little bit each time. And it's you can produce that. You can produce any sheen you want doing it that way, if you learn how to do it well.
What keeps you from grabbing it?
I use alcohol to keep it from grabbing. And if it starts catching, just stop for 15 minutes and come back. It'll be hard enough then where it'll float right over the surface. You can, the books will all tell you to use a small amount of linseed oil, or you can use mineral oil. The problem is you got to get that stuff out of there. And I picked it up from an English guy who said, I don't use any of that stuff. I just thin it back a little bit if it starts catching, and just quit for a little while and come back to it. Yeah, it's absolutely. And well, it does soften it, and it's almost like cross-linking. The things that cross-link actually, from coat to coat, bond into a common surface, and that's what shellac does. It's a different process, but as you get toward the end of the project, and you think you're getting closer and closer to being finished, use thinner and thinner and thinner shellac. And that way, what you're doing is you're doing more flattening and smoothing than adding material. But no, the alcohol keeps moving the stuff around a little bit, so you get a much smoother surface.
Same thing's true in nitrocellulose lacquer. That last coat you put on there, you need to thin that thing some, and you need to leave the sides alone for the most part. Just concentrate on the top and flow that top out, and that thing will be gorgeous. Don't thin it a lot, but maybe 20%. You'll get a feel for it. Do a test piece on the side and shoot it, and
When you did the molding on that one, did you do the molding first and then go to the top?
Yep.
Or did you go? Okay.
First thing I do is the legs. It's on a turntable, and the first thing I do is the legs. I mean, I've already shot the underside and all that, but I do the legs and the skirt board, and then I do the outside of the molding, then I go around the top of the molding, and then I start going back and forth. And I release each time. In other words, I've got the trigger pressed, and I'm down here, and then I'm releasing, and I start back again. And I'm overlapping. I overlap what you don't want to, there's a term for
Like
that.
a human CNC machine, you're just staying whatever level you're staying.
It is, and it's hard. If you've got a big tabletop, it really hurts, and you kind of get ready before you do it, and because you got to make it count. And you don't just when you're out there in the middle of that thing, it's just you really, and you got to get down at an angle where you can see the spray. You've got to be able to see that way, and you need a full wet coat. I cannot overemphasize that. You're not that far from the piece. Your spray gun's probably not about this far from the piece. If you get too close to the piece, you're going to get orange peel. There's a fine line there. And that's the adjustments on it. On a gravity gun, you're probably going to have the material set. The air pressure is probably going to be somewhere around 30. The material's only going to be down around 8 or 9, 10, somewhere in there, 10 psi. you know, you're gonna adjust those.
So what do they mean when they say 10 PSI at the tip? How do you gonna make sure?
You adjust it, you can actually adjust it on the guns.
Well, I can see what pressure, I got a regulator at the
Yeah.
inlet to the gun. But
That's how I do it. Yep. Yep. The regulator into the gun, on a gravity gun, the gravity gun's gonna do most of it. And you're just gonna set, because that's the only adjustment you got. You do have another adjustment on the tip there. And that's a volume adjustment on the tip. And if you've got a pressure pot, you have it, and I use a pressure pot if I'm doing a lot of spraying. But you also, if you use a pressure pot, for heaven's sakes, use a liner. You've got to use a liner for the pressure pot. They sell those. The stores, the finishing stores sell them. And if you don't, you'll pick up junk out of the darn pressure pot.
Yeah.
But you'll set the air pressure on those for about 28, 29, somewhere in there. You'll set the fluid pressure somewhere between 5 and 10 psi. I mean, on the material pressure, you know, the thing that's pushing the lacquer. You know, the air to the gun is going to be considerably higher than that. There's a sweet spot with it. You have to play with it a little bit. And every gun, different people make real good guns. Seda makes a real good gun. They're about 250, 200, 250. I don't use those $600 ones. I didn't want to put the money into it.
On cabinet work, and on some other pieces of furniture, nothing like this. I've used the HVLP spray guns. They're very easy to use, and I've sprayed 2-part polyurethanes with them that blow the world up. I've sprayed water-based stuff with them. Shellac, I don't find shellac sprays too well, but because the heat causes the alcohol to evaporate very rapidly, and then you end up with those little dot-looking things all over the place. So I've just stuck with the old-timey ways. Does it?
I'm able to spray shellac, yeah, because I use it.
what do you use on dry? It's real heartbreaking when water comes flying out of the gun.
Oh, okay. I'm glad you asked that. If you have a basement, put the compressor in the basement. Put it down in the bottom of the basement, okay? And drain it every day, every single day that you use it. And there's an easy way to do that if you don't want to go down there and drain it and blow your ears out because the thing's so loud. What I do is they sell a solenoid valve. They sell a ball valve, an automated ball valve, but they also sell a solenoid valve. The ball valve doesn't work. It leaks a little bit. The solenoid valve, for some idiotic reason, it's about $30 and it works. And when I get through at the end of the day, I'm lazy, I'm old, I don't like going upstairs and all. I go over there and I do this every single day. I switch the compressor off upstairs and I go right beside it and open that solenoid valve and I drain it. You've got to drain it. And the fact that it's in the basement helps a lot. The next thing is every single air station has a dryer on it. It does have a dryer on it, yeah. I have trouble with the dryers. They tend to leak air after a while. I have to fiddle with them some. But I do use them. Every single station's got that. And I have very little of that. Even on a humid day, when I'm up there using an air gun or something, I don't get a lot of moisture. That's incredibly important. I'm glad you brought that up. If you're getting the moisture, you're going to put it right into the piece. Yeah, and if you've got the compressor sitting right there beside you, it's going to be a lot worse. If you're not using a dryer, it's going to be even worse. If you're not draining the compressor every day, religiously every day, just drain it. Just flip the thing.
I've gone to a better dryer and draining and all of that. That's helpful.
Yeah. You know, there are some real good dryers that you could probably use. I tried those, but I put $200 into that thing at one time, and I didn't tell that much difference in it, so I quit. But I do have the dryers on every single station. All the air stations have dryers. And I have one specifically at the paint booth. It's got 2 dryers on it.
When you talk about charging the pad or whatever, do you ever charge the sponge itself, or do you charge the outside of the pan?
Well, when I started, man, I reuse these things, so they're in plastic bags, and I get them out, and they're hard as a rock. So I'll put on the sponge itself. Most finishers are real picky about it and want to put it on the sponge, and then so that the cloth will act as a filter. I filter everything anyway, and I'm not that picky, and I don't seem to have problems with it. One thing you will have problems with, though, if you got to keep an eye on it, is the fabric, the outer fabric will wear. It's got friction, and you'll get, if you start seeing you're picking up little specks of something, it's a good chance that some of the threads in that fabric have worn through. And then all you got to do is put a new fresh piece on top of it. And I'll go 2-3 layers sometimes and then start over again. But if you clean the stuff up before you use it and do it in a squeeze bottle, then you can do either way. You can just hold it in your hand and put it right down in there this way, or if you're using it and it's getting too dry, you can just shoot it on there. It'll go down in, and then you go again.
And those little squeeze bottles you can buy from U.S. Plastics.
Yeah,
online.
and they're dirt cheap that way.
They're real cheap.
And they're not cheap at the, they're expensive at the beauty shop. They're appealing to egos there. That's. We getting.
They're very inexpensive on this squeeze bottle. I know, 'cause I just bought a bunch that I use for distilled water.
Ooh. Maybe next time we can come. One of the things we were going to talk some about was paint, which is a serious finish material, and we'll pick it up, add a little bit of that next time.
Yeah. There's also a lacquer version of that too.
Well, and the conversion varnish is done. They do that with the pigmented stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hopefully, it will worthwhile.
February when you guys
Thank you.
dealing with techniques to apply.
We'll bring some more things in.